So you're ready to start Part B, Interpretation and Data Collection. This is your first individual assignment and it's worth 15% of your final grade. So you really need to put some time and effort into this. You are allowed to work collaboratively with your team. So if you're having problems with your article and you're not sure, please spend some time talking to your teammates, run your ideas past them and get their feedback. But under no circumstances are you allowed to discuss this with other people in the class or in a different class. So you can work collaboratively with your team, but you can't have discussions outside of your team. So you can't, get all the people together who are working on wages and work through the assignments together. The purpose of this assignment is, first of all, so that you can demonstrate that you understand what the current collective agreement says, and then you can start pulling together important data that you will use later on in order to determine what changes need to be made to the language. Data collection is really critical to successful negotiations. It's going to give you the information that you need to support the changes that you're recommending when you're sitting at the negotiation table. So let's look at the different parts of this assignment. So the first part of the assignment is the interpretation of your article. So you need to demonstrate to me that you understand what the current language means. And you're going to do this using a question and answer format. So I want you to think that you're having a discussion with somebody that is in the union. So we talked about him as being that dude from the plant. He's got a grade 12 education, has looked at the collective agreement, and doesn't understand the article about specified holidays. So you're going to read through the article and you're going to come up with questions. And the first one that the dude's going to ask you is, what is a specified holiday? Now you're the human resources practitioner at Consolidated Electric and you need to be able to answer that question. So how about the one that's up there? It's the same thing as a public holiday. How do you like that as an answer? Well, what do you think the next question the dude's going to ask? What's a public holiday? So let's see if we can improve our question. Our answer. Okay, it's a predetermined day on which employees get the day off work and they're paid for that day. Hey, that's a pretty straightforward answer. So it's telling him or her that somebody decides which days they are, and whatever days they are, they get the day off work and they're paid. Not bad. Well, but if we got everything in it, let's see. What if we add some more? What if we start saying, well, some of the holidays are the same as public holidays required under ESA, and there are 3 days that are scheduled in December. The exact dates of these days are determined in discussions between union and management. So what do you think of that answer? Well, I'm starting to think we're getting into answering a second question, which would be, what specified holidays do we get at Consolidated Electric? So I think that second answer probably was great in answering the initial question, and that we need to add in a second question. How many questions and answers do you need in this section? Well, my answer to that is, it depends. Each article is really different. Some articles are quite simple, and you may only need the minimum of 3 questions and answers in order to in order to go through all of the language. But other articles are quite complex, and you may be writing 10 or 12 questions and answers. So don't look at what somebody else is doing for their article and start panicking because you don't have as much, because their article may be more complex here than yours. Every article is a little bit different, so there's not a standard answer. But my guideline for you is just keep adding new questions and answers until you're confident that I know that you know what the collective agreement currently says. The second part of the assignment is the research. Now, information is power, and you're going to need information at the bargaining table in order to persuade the other side to do what you want them to do. In class, we talked about some of the information that you might collect. Legislation, so what do we need to do by law? The economy. Is the company going to be profitable? What is going on in the economy that may impact on their ability to change working conditions? And remember, you already researched this in Part A. Competition. So what are similar businesses doing with respect to your article? Another question that we would normally do research on are there problems with the current language? So we would be talking to our constituents, whether we're on the management team and we're talking to the first line supervisors and managers, or if we're on the union side and we're talking to our membership and finding out, were there problems with the language? And of course, where there were real problems, we're going to see grievances and arbitration. So we're going to look at those, and that's going to suggest changes that we need to make. The other thing is that there just might be changes that are important to the parties. So the members may want to see some changes made to the collective agreement, and we're going to find out by doing surveys and information interviews. The parent union may want new language added to a collective agreement throughout all of their different local unions. And management may want to see some changes to the language. But in our assignment, we're going to focus on the first three: legislation, economy, and competition. So, going back to our example, using the specified holidays. When we go to the legislation, we discovered, yes, that in the Employment Standards Act, there is legislation about required statutory holidays. And there were 4 basic things that we saw in the legislation that we wanted to look at. So the first thing that you're going to make sure you do is you're going to put the URL for the legislation. Where did you find information about the legislation? Data collected. Well, let's look at the first line. Well, Ontario has 9 public holidays, okay? And in the legislation, it lists what holidays they are. Now, when we compare this to Consolidate Electric, we know that they offer 11 specified holidays. 7 that are listed in the collective agreement. There's 2 half shifts, one Christmas Eve and one New Year's Eve day. And then there's the 3 days in December, so that's a total of 11 days. What's the impact on the negotiations? Well, even though we offer more days than required by ESA, the 7 days that are listed don't include all of the days that are listed in the Employment Standards Act. So that might be a problem. And so the next thing that we put in there is Boxing Day and Family Day. And we've noted that they're not on the list of holidays in the collective agreement. So we can expect that that needs to be fixed, that the union will ask for these days to be added onto the list. Another thing we noticed was in the Employment Standards Act, they talk about Labor Day, but the contract refers to Dominion Day. Well, that's old school language. And so the potential impact is we need to update that language to reflect the changes in the Employment Standards Act. Now, another thing that we noticed is that the Employment Standards Act talks about substitute holidays. So if an employee is asked to work on a public holiday, they can take another day off. And this isn't discussed in our collective agreement. Now, the collective agreement does not have to repeat all of the language that's in the Employment Standards Act, but this might be something that's been causing some confusion, so we may anticipate that we're going to be asked to add new language into the collective agreement. So I've just filled out the chart, and there's some examples of how that information spans out. The next piece that you need to work on is the economic indicators. So remember I told you Part A wasn't going away? You've collected all kinds of information. Now you need to go back to Part A and figure out if it applies, if it's going to have any influence on your article. So going back to Part A, for the first piece, the impression of the economy and its potential impact on the negotiation of your article. Look at the economic indicators, the demand for labor, and what's been going on in the manufacturing industry. Will these things have any impact on your article? Tell me what you think it might be. If you don't think it's going to have an impact, tell me you don't think it's going to have an impact. But if you leave it blank, then all I can assume is that you didn't do the piece and you won't earn any grades. Someone on your group or your entire group also analyzed CE's financial performance. So that is going to give you some information about whether or not Consolidated Electric has money to spend on improving working conditions. And you need to think about your article and whether or not that's going to impact on that. So tell me, what did you learn about the finances? What's the impact on your article? You'll see I have a section for references, so if you take anything specific from Part A that needs to be cited, make sure you put it in the references. If it's all just coming in general from Part A, you can put a notation there saying all my observations came from our Part A. Okay, the final piece is a competitive analysis. And there are two parts to the competitive analysis. You've got to collect data, and then you've got to tell me what you think the data means. Now, the collection of data is what I'm going to look at first, and the collection of data can happen in two ways. For some articles, there is no information in the case that you can use. So you're going to use Negotech to find companies that are similar to Consolidated Electric and find out what they allow for in their collective agreements. So this is an example of doing this kind of analysis. So in the first column, you'll see that I have my data for Consolidated Electric. So they're located in the GTA. Their agreement expires April 2014. There's no URL because it's the case. They offer 11 specified holidays. Another question is, can the employees choose the dates? And no, they're all preset. And another question is, can employees take the day off before or after and still be eligible for a specified holiday? And the answer is only if they provide medical evidence satisfactory to the company or if they're on a vacation or a leave of absence. Okay, so that's all data that's been taken from the collective agreement. Company number 1 is located in Guelph. That's close enough to the GTA to be acceptable. Their collective agreement expires in 2019, so I'm happy with that. You'll notice I didn't put a URL in because I made this up. So you're going to actually put the URL for the PDF that you found through Negotech there. When I looked at their their collective agreement, I realized that they offer 14 specified holidays. I also noted that employees are allowed to choose 2 days. They're called floaters, so they can choose what 2 days that they want to take off. And for the last one, I realized that if they provide medical evidence that's satisfactory to the company, or if they're on vacation or a leave of absence, they can take the days off before or after. I did the same analysis for company 2, which is in Hamilton, and their collective agreement expires in 2016. And for another company that's located in Brampton, and theirs expires in 2015. So this gives me some really interesting data. I haven't said what the data means at this point, but I've got data to work from. Now, there are other articles that have data in the case. And so for these articles, you must use that data. Now, specified holidays in reality is one of the articles that has data in the collective agreement. So I've done a bit of an analysis, or I've done a bit of an analysis of the numbers. So for each of the 17 companies, what I did was on an Excel spreadsheet, I put in the company number first, and then the number of days, specified holidays they offer. And then I did a sort, because I didn't do a very good sort, because it shouldn't have been, number 9 shouldn't be 11. Anyways, I did a sort, and because I wanted to put them in order of the number of specified holidays, but number 9 should have been at the top. And then once I did that, I could start to do some basic analysis. So the first thing was the average, and we did this in class, and it worked out to be 12.65 days. So that's some interesting information. The second thing I wanted to look at was the median. So that's the middle value. So all I did was count from the top and the bottom to find the middle value, and it was 13 days. Now, the lowest number of days offered was 11, and the highest number was 14. The mode is the number that's repeated most often, and so for each of them I counted them up, and I discovered that 13 was the number of days offered, and I think it's offered in 8 cases. And then the last thing I wanted to look at was the range. So that's the difference between the minimum and the maximum number of days, and the range is 14. So that gives me some data for consideration. So if I were doing this, I would have blown away the chart, and I would have put this information into my assignment. Now, the second part is my data interpretation. So I've churned up some numbers, but now I need to explain what I think those numbers mean. Is Consolidated Electric offering a competitive number of specified holidays? The competitive data suggests no. That at 11 days, they're at the lowest end of the number of days offered, that the average is 12.65, that the mode is 13. So there's a lot of competitive pressure to increase the number of specified holidays. So this is a written piece that just makes sense of the data that you have compiled. Oh, strategy. Should I be talking about my strategy at this point? Well, look at the strategic planning process. Analyze. So at the moment, we need to pull together information, okay? We're not going to start planning and figuring out what to do yet, because garbage in, garbage out. I want to make sure that you've collected good data before you start building a strategy. So, if there's a problem with your interpretation or some of your data collection, we need to resolve it before you start making plans about what you want to change in the collective agreement. So please don't start talking strategy. That's for part C. Let's get the data first. Okay, you got all the information. It's time to go for it and get your assignment done. The most important thing about this assignment is don't leave it to the last minute. It's not a hard assignment to do, but if you leave it to the end, you'll panic and it'll be really difficult to pull it all together. So get going on it and have some fun.